Every June 15th, as the first rays of morning sunlight pierce through the pine trees surrounding Mirror Lake, an elderly man steps into his rowboat. He rows in silence, never rushed, never late, until he reaches the exact center of the water. Then, without ceremony, he takes a single white lily from his coat pocket and gently places it on the surface. He sits for a moment, eyes closed, then rows back, saying nothing. He's done this every year for as long as anyone can remember. Locals have come up with stories. Some say it's for a wife he lost long ago. Others whisper about a fallen comrade from Vietnam. But the old man never confirms or denies anything. He just watches the water, quiet, steady, alone. And what no one knows is that on this particular June 15th, someone else will be waiting at the lake's edge, someone carrying a story of their own, one that could finally shatter the silence he's kept for over 50 years. You're watching Echo Stories, where hidden lives and buried memories come back to life. Subscribe to uncover powerful emotional journeys into the untold past. Let's begin. Raymond Keller had become a fixture in the town of Stillwater without ever meaning to be. At 81, with a quiet gait and a voice as soft as worn denim, he was the kind of man who blended into the background, unless it was June 15th. On that day, without fail, he would walk from his small house near the forest edge, pass by the same gas station, nod at the same clerk, and disappear down the gravel trail that led to Mirror Lake. Locals knew better than to follow. They had seen him do it for years, row to the center of the lake, place a white lily on the water, sit silently for a few minutes, and then return home. He never explained it, never invited company, and no one ever asked. Rumors, of course, grew like moss in Stillwater. Some claimed it was a memorial to a wife who died young. Others swore he had lost a child in the war. A few romanticized the story, imagining Raymond as a retired spy paying homage to a secret love affair cut short by politics or time. But Raymond never confirmed or denied any of it. He just kept rowing, kept dropping the flower, and kept living quietly the other 364 days of the year. His home was simple. One story, creaky floorboards, and walls lined with books and dusty military memorabilia. An old folded flag sat in a glass case above the fireplace. A rusted dog tag hung beside it, and tucked in a drawer, rarely touched, was a faded photograph of 3 men in uniform standing in front of a chopper. One had his arm around Raymond's shoulder. That man's name had been Ellis James, and he was the reason Raymond had stopped believing in closure. In 1971, Raymond and Ellis had served together in Vietnam. They had trained together, fought together, and nearly died together more than once. Ellis was braver, louder, funnier, the kind of man who made friends in seconds and held them for life. In June of that year, during a mission that went sideways, Ellis had volunteered to stay behind and cover their retreat. He was declared missing in action 2 weeks later. Raymond waited for years, letters, calls, a knock on the door, but nothing came. Eventually, the military sent a letter. Presumed dead, that was the phrase. 2 words that said everything and nothing. Raymond never married, never moved far. He took a job as a ranger for the local state park and lived his life in routines. The flower on the lake, that began 10 years after Ellis disappeared. At first it had been for Ellis alone. Then, over time, for every name Raymond couldn't forget. Men lost, promises broken, echoes that wouldn't fade. This June 15th began like all the others. Raymond rose at dawn, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat in the same chair by the window. The light was soft, gold spilling across the floorboards. He placed the lily, freshly cut from his yard, into a canvas pouch and zipped up his faded green jacket. As he stepped onto the trail, he nodded at the gas station clerk, who lifted his coffee in silent salute. Routine. Predictable. Until he reached the lake. Someone was there. A young man, maybe late 20s, stood at the edge of the dock. He wore jeans, a gray hoodie, and nervousness like a second skin. When he saw Raymond, he straightened, unsure whether to speak. Raymond slowed but didn't stop. "You lost?" Raymond asked, not unkindly. "No, sir," the man replied. I was hoping to speak with you." Raymond's grip on the flower pouch tightened. "You know what day it is?" Yes, that's why I came. Raymond eyed him. What's your name? Caleb James. The world shifted, not violently, but like a floorboard creaking under hidden weight. James? Raymond said. Yes, sir. Ellis James was my grandfather. Raymond hadn't sat down yet. He didn't trust his knees. That's not possible. Ellis didn't have kids. He never... He did, Caleb interrupted, his voice steady but uncertain. He just didn't know about me. Or maybe he did in the end. My mom never told me much. Only that he was a soldier, that he never came home. I found his name in some old records, and I found you in an old photo. It led me here. Raymond opened his mouth, then closed it again. There were 100 thoughts rushing through his mind, but none he could grab hold of. The wind picked up slightly, brushing the lake's surface in gentle ripples. The silence between them was thick and unsolved. What do you want from me, son? Raymond asked finally, his voice quieter than before. Caleb hesitated, looking down at his hands. I guess I want to know who he was. I want to know what kind of man he really was, from someone who actually knew him, not just medals or files or missing in action reports. Raymond looked out over the lake, the reflection of the sky shimmering faintly. Then he slowly sat on the edge of the dock, gesturing for Caleb to do the same. The old man exhaled through his nose, resting his elbows on his knees. Ellis James, he said slowly, as if saying the name itself required effort, was fire in a human body, not reckless but alive. He could talk a man out of a fistfight and then talk him into volunteering for something insane. He made jokes under gunfire. He whistled marching tunes even when our boots were soaked in blood and rain. He was stubborn as hell, smart, loyal, and I never got to say goodbye. Caleb listened closely, barely breathing. We were stationed together in 71, Raymond continued, deep in the jungle. Days were long, nights were longer. Ellis always said he hated silence, said it reminded him too much of funerals. So he talked, always talked, about music, about baseball, about girls back home, and about a girl named Linda. Said she was the only one who ever made him nervous. My grandmother's name was Linda, Caleb whispered. Raymond looked at him, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Figures, he muttered, then chuckled once, dry and short. Caleb smiled, then asked, what happened that day? The day he disappeared? Raymond's smile faded. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a battered tin case, and lit a cigarette with shaky fingers. We were escorting a medic convoy through a ravine, he said. Routine, at least it was supposed to be. But halfway in, shots rang out. Ambush, chaos. We took cover behind a burned-out truck. Ellis dragged 2 wounded guys to safety. I covered him best I could, but we were outnumbered. At some point, I took a hit in the leg. Couldn't move. Ellis, he looked at me, gave me this stupid grin and said, I'll be right back. Don't die without me. Then he ran into the trees, trying to draw fire away from us. Raymond paused, the cigarette trembling in his fingers. We waited. Minutes, hours. The jungle was quiet again. No sign of him. Helicopter came. We had to evacuate. I begged them to wait. I screamed. They didn't. They pulled me out and that was it. I never saw him again. Caleb stared at the lake, his voice tight. Do you think he died out there? Raymond shook his head slowly. I don't know. Years later I heard whispers, unconfirmed sightings, intercepted transmissions. There was even a rumor of a POW who matched his description. But they buried the reports. Said the war was over. Said to let it go. Caleb looked at him, pain written across his face. That's what everyone tells me too. To let it go. Raymond glanced at him, really looked at him, and saw in his eyes the same ache, the same relentless need for answers. You carry it too, Raymond said. I guess it runs in the blood, Caleb replied. For a while neither spoke. The lake was quiet again, and the lily still drifted far from shore. Then Caleb reached into his backpack and pulled out a small box. I found this in my mom's things after she died, he said. She never told me much, but it felt important. There's a letter inside. It's addressed to R.K. That's you, right? Raymond took the box slowly, his hands trembling as he opened it. Inside was a yellowed envelope, the paper fragile with age. He opened it and began to read. His eyes moved across the lines and his breath caught in his throat. The letter was from Ellis. In shaky, rushed handwriting, it read, "Ray, if this ever reaches you, it means I didn't make it back. I'm sorry. I tried. I crossed into Laos like they told me not to because I saw something I wasn't supposed to. They'll tell you I died. Maybe I will. But know this, I didn't leave you behind. I never would. You were the best man I ever knew. If Linda gets this, tell her I'm sorry too. I wish I'd told her about the baby. I wish I'd told you more about everything. You were my brother. Don't let the silence eat you." Raymond folded the letter carefully, his throat tight. He couldn't speak for several minutes. Caleb waited, patient and still. The room was filled with the quiet weight of memory, of words unsaid for half a century. Raymond's fingers brushed the edge of the paper again, as if trying to absorb something more truth, more presence, more of Ellis. His hands trembled slightly as he set the letter on the table in front of him, beside a half-empty mug of cold coffee. The silence between the two men wasn't awkward. It was sacred. A silence that held decades of grief, unanswered questions, and now, at last, a fragile sense of resolution. Raymond took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. I must have read 1,000 obituaries, thinking maybe one of them was Ellis under a different name. I'd picture him walking out of some jungle, sunburnt and scarred, but alive. Every June, I came here and dropped that lily and wondered if he might be watching from somewhere, just out of reach. His voice cracked and he cleared his throat. To know that he tried to get a message through, that he didn't just vanish, that changes everything. Caleb nodded, his eyes glassy. My mom kept the letter hidden. I think she didn't want to open the wound again. Or maybe she thought no one would believe it was real. Raymond's gaze softened. She carried that silence too, in her own way. They sat in the dim light, both men tethered to a man long gone, but suddenly more real than ever before. Raymond slowly stood, joints groaning, and motioned for Caleb to follow him into the other room. There, he opened a tall cabinet and removed a small wooden box. Inside were relics, old pins, dog tags, a frayed patch with faded lettering, and a photograph Raymond hadn't looked at in years. He handed it to Caleb. It showed 3 soldiers, grinning like fools in the middle of a muddy field. One of them was Ellis, his arm draped around Raymond, both men soaked from rain but smiling as if they'd just won the war. "That was the last photo taken before the ambush," Raymond said. "We were tired, filthy, hungry. But somehow he made us laugh, said we'd all meet up in D.C. someday and run for Congress just to piss off our CO. Caleb chuckled through a sniffle. "Sounds like something he'd say." Raymond smiled. He had a way of making you believe things, even in the darkest places. He handed Caleb a pin next. It was simple, a tarnished insignia with a cracked enamel star. That was his. He gave it to me the night before the mission, said it would bring me luck. I never wore it. Felt like cheating. Raymond placed the pin in Caleb's hand. "I think he'd want you to have it now." Caleb closed his fingers around it, holding it tight like something fragile and sacred. "I'll take care of it. I know you will." Later, as dusk settled over Stillwater, they sat on the porch, wrapped in a quiet that felt less like emptiness and more like peace. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting the lake in golden reflection. Raymond lit a lantern, and the flame flickered between them. "You remind me of him," Raymond said suddenly. Caleb turned. "Really? Not just the way you look, the way you showed up, the way you asked questions. Ellis was always searching, always trying to make sense of the world. You've got that same fire." Caleb didn't know what to say. He just nodded, his throat too tight for words. As night fell, Caleb prepared to leave. He stood awkwardly by the door, reluctant. "You're welcome here any time," Raymond said, sensing it. "I might take you up on that," Caleb replied. He stepped outside, then turned back. "Raymond?" "Yeah? Thank you for not shutting the door." Raymond's smile was small but full. "Ellis wouldn't have let me," and with that Caleb disappeared down the path, the letter tucked inside his coat and the pin in his pocket. Raymond stood for a while at the doorway, watching the wind ripple across the lake in soft waves. Inside, he returned to the mantel, picked up the compass, and turned it slowly in his hands. The needle spun, then settled. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was waiting for something. He felt present, grounded. He placed the compass beside Ellis's photo, next to the folded flag and the lily pressed between glass. Then he sat back in his chair and let the memories come, not as ghosts, but as guests. Outside, the moon climbed above the treetops, and Mirror Lake shimmered like a sheet of silver. Somewhere deep in the night, an owl called once, and Raymond Keller closed his eyes with a soft breath. The echoes of June had never felt so alive. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with connection, and sometimes that's enough. Thank you for joining us on this journey through memory, sacrifice, and love that never truly fades.